Welcome to this explainer. You know, history is usually told through this lens of progress and victory, right? But beneath the surface of every US state lies a darkest day. We're talking about moments so devastating that some were almost completely erased from our collective memory. From the absolute deadliest natural disasters to acts of pure human malice, these events literally rewrote the American story. So today, we're stepping into the shadows. We're going to remember the hidden tragedies and catastrophes that really shaped the nation. Because let's face it, understanding how we got here means looking at the events that tested us the most. Let's dive in. Which brings us to a really crucial question that's going to guide our entire investigation today. What is your state's darkest day? Think about it. From uncontrollable natural disasters to targeted, intentional acts, every single region in the United States has faced an event that pushed its people to the absolute brink. And this concept is our main focus today. It reminds us that while history books love to highlight the triumphs, some of the most shaping moments in the American story were actually devastating catastrophes that got quietly buried. We're shifting the historical lens today to uncover those exact moments. Section 1. The Wrath of Nature, Uncontrollable Forces. So we're beginning by examining external forces that forever changed the American landscape back in the early 1900s. And the sheer terrifying scale of our first disaster is captured by just a single number, 15. That's the height in feet of a massive storm surge that struck the booming island city of Galveston, Texas in the year 1900. Now, what made this so incredibly fatal was how utterly exposed this city was. On September 8, 1900, with absolutely no warning system in place, none whatsoever, a massive hurricane brought that 15-foot surge rolling right over the entire island. It swept away houses, streets, and lives in a matter of moments. Between 6,000 and 12,000 people perished. To put that into perspective, to this day, it remains the deadliest natural disaster in American history. An entire prosperous city was practically erased by the sea before anyone even knew what was happening. And unfortunately, this kind of devastation was mirrored just 6 years later over in California. At exactly 5:12 a.m. on April 18, 1906, the San Andreas Fault ruptured. But here's the thing, the earthquake was only the beginning of the nightmare. Over the next 3 days, broken gas lines ignited relentless fires that leveled most of San Francisco. When the smoke finally cleared, 3,000 people were dead, and half of the entire city was left totally homeless. Section 2. Forgotten Massacres. Racial Tension. Okay, our next segment shifts from natural disasters to intentional human malice. And to really understand these forgotten massacres, we have to first look at what was lost. Black Wall Street was the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Back in 1921, it was widely known as a thriving, remarkably prosperous hub. It was filled with Black-owned banks, theaters, hotels, doctors. It was a true beacon of success. But over 2 devastating days in 1921, that prosperity was met with extreme violence. A white mob looted and burned 35 city blocks to the ground. Survivors even reported that private planes dropped firebombs from the sky. No, really, from the sky. When it was all over, up to 300 people were killed, and a thriving community was effectively erased. It is a stark historical reality that was kept very quiet for a very long time. Next, we actually have to define an unthinkable term to grasp the severity of our next event, a coup d'etat. That's the sudden, violent overthrow of an existing government by a small group. We need this definition because the only successful government overthrow on American soil actually occurred in Wilmington, North Carolina in 1898. The historical knowledge gap here is just staggering. For nearly a century, official historical records quietly buried this targeted government overthrow by labeling it a mere riot. But the historical reality? It's far more severe. It wasn't a riot, it was a successful, organized coup d'etat. The sheer, undeniable force used to accomplish this was terrifying. In 1898, an armed mob of up to 2,000 men marched through Wilmington. They violently overthrew a multiracial elected government at gunpoint. They gunned down residents in the streets and literally forced the city's elected leaders to resign their posts. Thousands of residents fled the city, never to return. Section 3. The Price of Neglect. Systemic Failures. So now we examine tragedies born from fatal systemic negligence. And the gross oversight is immediately apparent when we hear the numbers. In April 1865, The Sultana steamboat was intended to carry just 376 passengers. That's it. Instead, it was packed with over 2,000 starving Union soldiers returning home from prison camps. This extreme overcrowding led to an unthinkable death toll of up to 1,800 people. The heartbreaking irony here is profound. These were soldiers who had survived the absolute horrors of war and brutal prison camps, like Andersonville, only to be crammed onto a dangerously overloaded vessel on the flooded Mississippi River. In the dead of night, the boat's overworked, patched boilers exploded. It remains the worst maritime disaster in U.S. history, and yet it was almost completely overshadowed because it happened just 2 weeks after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. We turn now to a quiet farm town in Michigan for an act of pure human bitterness that remains a heavily forgotten dark chapter. In 1927, in Bath, Michigan, a bitter school board treasurer caused the deadliest school massacre in U.S. history. We see how a single individual's resentment can build into unimaginable tragedy. A man about to lose his farm sought revenge by secretly wiring the local Bath Consolidated School with hundreds of pounds of explosives. The resulting blast on the morning of May 18th killed 38 children and 6 adults. It remains the deadliest school massacre in America, a grim fact of history that many have completely forgotten. Section 4. Moments of Infamy Changed America. Now, some dark days are so globally monumental, they didn't just affect a state. They forever altered the trajectory of the entire nation. These two dates, separated by exactly 60 years, both represent paradigm-shifting surprise attacks. On December 7, 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor immediately pulled America into World War II. 6 decades later, on September 11, 2001, the nation watched in horror as the Twin Towers were attacked, forcing the country into a completely new era of global conflict. The horrific scale and historical impact both these events share is profound. Pearl Harbor saw over 2,400 lives lost in a military strike in Hawaii, pulling the U.S. into a global war. September 11th saw nearly 3,000 lives lost in New York City, marking the deadliest terrorist attack in history. Both days changed the world forever. Section 5. The Strength to Rebuild. Hope in Darkness. After exploring the depths of all this tragedy, our narrative requires a resolution. From the desperate starving time in 1609 Jamestown, Virginia, to the modern-day tragedy of Hurricane Katrina, these 50 states have endured 50 of the darkest days imaginable. But there is a vital thread of hope here. In every single instance, the communities found the strength to rebuild. The towns came back, safety laws were improved, and the people kept going. We remember the darkness not to dwell there, but to honor those lost and to ensure that history never repeats itself. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. Which of these historical moments shocked you the most? Was it the sheer scale of a natural disaster, the suppressed history of a forgotten massacre, or the fatal price of neglect? Take a moment to reflect on the hidden history you just learned. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and keep seeking the full story. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.